Welcome, and make yourself comfortable, and when you are ready, you may begin with your opening statement.
Thank you. There's only so comfortable you can be here, but I will try to avail myself of making myself comfortable. It's good to be with you, and I'll explain what this thing is here in a moment. Chairperson Roberts and members of the commission, it is a privilege to be here. It wasn't that long ago that I sat here before many of you, and you have a very strong slate of candidates before you, and it's a privilege to be among them today. Cheering for me today is my family, my wife of almost 30 years, 4 kids. My daughter Elizabeth is with us in the courtroom today. I have a mother who is watching over the internet from my childhood home in Mount Pleasant with my brother, and I have a fantastic office staff that is watching, wondering what in the world I am doing. But there are some people cheering for you. There are, in fact, 3 million people that are cheering for you. And they may not understand what's going on today, but they're counting on you to get this right. And so, not to put too much pressure on you, but it is a lot of weight on your plate today to make sure that you make a good decision for the people of Iowa. Well, I'm going to talk to you today about baseball and dirt. Before I do, I want to say just one thing about the seat that I'm seeking to take on the Court of Appeals, and that is Judge Vogel. It is not lost upon me that I am seeking to replace one of the finest jurors we have had in Iowa. And if you have met Judge Vogel, you know that she is a person of great kindness, great intellect. She served in the Court of Appeals for 23 years with great distinction and with great civility and decency. And these are big shoes to fill, and I am very aware of that. So, baseball and dirt. So, one of the commission members in my personal interview talked to me about how they are viewing this task as selecting members of a baseball team. Now, I had not heard that before, and it was very refreshing to me, not because I am a great baseball player. I was a very mediocre baseball player. My baseball coach was none other than Tom Vilsack, former Secretary of Agriculture and governor of this great state. I know, it's a strange situation. As hard as he tried, I never amounted to much more than a mediocre baseball player. But I understood the game well enough to appreciate this metaphor, because what you are looking for is not just a series of pitchers. You're looking for members to play the entire team. And I'm going to let that concept of team resonate, because that's what this is about. Imagine if you had a baseball team and you had all pitchers. As good of pitchers as they would be, at some point you would need someone to cover first base or third base or the outfield. And so I hope that this commission embraces this concept, that you are putting together a team. Now, to put some more specificity to that, I thought it would be helpful to talk about a few cases, and not many and not in great detail. But there are a few cases that I think are important, and I pulled out 2 from the recent group of cases that came down Tuesday. And the first is a case called City of St. Lucas versus Langerak. This is a city that's about 142 people up in northeast Iowa, and they had a quiet title action, and that went up to the Court of Appeals for a piece of ground that's probably worth $1,000. At some point, it stops being about the money, right? And so this case went up to the Iowa Court of Appeals. And what I want to suggest to you, that as we have these kinds of cases, I would suggest it's very important that people on the Court of Appeals actually know what this is. This is called an abstract, and hopefully you have yours for your house. And so examining this abstract, and examining abstracts like this for over 23 years, has given me a perspective on the concept of land title that's very important, not just in residential, but commercial and industrial types of situations. Another case that came down in this last group was a case that'll probably have greater significance. It's Heartland Co-op versus Nelson. In Heartland Co-op versus Nelson, it was a case of whether the owner of a corporation would have successor liability. And in fact, the amount in this case, the dispute was over $110,000. That's a lot of money. And the court held that this individual who didn't think that he would have liability for his corporation, He now has it. Now, why is a case like this important for someone like me? Well, I sit across the table and I advise people on a regular basis about setting up businesses, buying businesses, selling businesses, and they need to know what the rules are. And so when we think about these kind of cases, we have to keep in mind that we're writing really for two audiences. Okay, this is very important. One is the actual parties in the case. We want to make sure that people who read these cases, they may not like the outcome. Half the people won't. But we want the outcomes to be understandable to them. We want them to say that was fair. But we also write for another audience, and that is for the rest of these 3 million people. These 3 million people are looking for guidance. And so I don't have a particular quibble with the outcomes of these cases. That's not why I brought them. But I bring them to bring to your attention that writing these cases in a way that provides guidance for the state of Iowa is critical. I think our business community, commercial interests, need to have certainty in the way in which this court and the Supreme Court does its work. And so that's something that I would bring to the court. And finally, I have a third case. And this is a case that came down from the spring, and it's Rottinghouse versus Lincoln Savings Bank in the estate of Franken. And this is a case where actually Judge Vogel wrote a dissenting opinion. This is a case as to whether a first right of refusal would be binding in the situation of an estate. 2 years ago, the court had the opportunity to get this right, and I believe got it wrong in an important case called Westlake's Properties. And Judge Vogel, I think, writes a very thoughtful and respectful dissent. And I'm just going to read a couple sentences to give you a flavor of this. She says, when Sarah Franken died in March 2014, she died as the record title holder. The estate could not and did not become the title holder. Instead, as an asset of Franken's estate, the property was merely subject to the possession of the executor. This is a concept that someone who does what I do for a living knows well. And had the court applied that, this case would have had a very different outcome. So it does matter that you have a full team when hearing these cases. So I like that metaphor of the baseball team very much. Secondly, I was going to talk about dirt. And this is a strange bottle of dirt, and I'll explain this. I serve on the District Court Commission for 2B. And the subject of how gender and geography would play a role in our selection of judges came up. And we had a very robust discussion about this. And what we decided on a unanimous basis was that gender and geography would not be determinative factors. They would be instead aspirational goals. And I'm proud to tell you that the majority of the judges that I've helped select in 2B are female. But they are not judges because they are female. They are judges because they were the best candidates in the pool. I'm very proud of that fact. But I do want to speak a little bit about geography. Even though I've spent the last 23 years in Ames, I hail from southeast Iowa in Henry County in Mount Pleasant. As I mentioned, Tom Vilsack was my baseball coach. Not only was he that, he was a mentor to many people in the community for his civility and public service before he ever got involved in public life. But my family roots are actually more in south central Iowa, and hence this strange bottle of dirt. My family settled in south central Iowa in little towns like Sheraton and Russell and farmed there prior to the American Civil War. And I was out this spring hiking, looking at some ditches where we have some erosion issues, and I came across this goofy little bottle. You see it in years past, farmers would burn their trash, and what they couldn't burn, they threw in their ditch. And so erosion had finally washed away the soil around this old bottle, and it's full of dirt. And it's of no value to really anyone except for me. And I have it on my bookcase in my office because it reminds me from where I come. But the real measure of geographical strength isn't the fact that I have this bottle of dirt on my shelf. It comes in the letters that you have received from lawyers all over Iowa, from Sioux City to Burlington. And I'm very proud of the relationships that I have formed. I love the lawyers in this state. And there are some regional differences around Iowa, and having traveled around the state, developing relationships, I think gives me a sensitivity to some of those differences. So with that, I look forward to the questions that you have today.
Thank you, Mr. Gartin. And we will begin with Ms. Conover.
Thank you. I have no questions.
Mr. Bloom.
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Spies.
Mr. Gartin, I enjoyed very much our conversation about books. But more interestingly to me is several months ago, the Committee for Judicial Conduct for the federal courts of the United States issued a ruling about membership in political organizations, membership in organizations that lobby legislators that contribute money or have anonymous donors. You're a member of the Federalist Society, and we talked about that a little bit, about how that informs your perspective. If the Federalist Society were determined to be an organization to which judges should not belong, would you adhere to that advisory opinion?
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Spies. Of course I would. And I serve, and I'll give you an example. I serve on the City Council of Ames. And I think it is critical that when people come before our city and they have matters before us, that they are going to have an objective fact finder, not affected by any kinds of potential loyalties or biases. And so if there was a determination that membership in organizations would be seen as a detriment, then I would set that aside for the good of the independence of the judiciary. Thank you for asking that question.
Sure.
Mr. Hoiting.
In my practice, I've transitioned what was from a practice that was more focused on litigation to becoming more of a transactional attorney. And having done that, I wish I would have known what I know now when I was a litigator. When you review court opinions, do you believe your background as a transactional attorney would be beneficial to bring to the Court of Appeals, to strengthen the court, or to add new perspective?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, Mr. Hoiting. I came from a similar background, so for the first 10 years of my practice, I was handling juvenile cases. I was representing people accused of crimes. So I have a similar type of background. But the transactional perspective would inform me in two ways. Number one, it would help shape what I'm looking for in the record. It gives me a set of lenses with which to think about the case before me. And then secondly, it would help me in writing opinions, not just to get the answer right, we hope, but also to write those opinions in a manner that is beneficial to the people of Iowa. Thank you for that question.
Ms. O'Brien.
Yes, Mr. Gartin, the criminal justice system has a horrible adverse impact on people of color, and that is really true in Iowa and nationwide as well. Do you have any thoughts on the role of the court system in addressing those disparities?
Well, I appreciate that question very much, and I have a lot to say on this, more than our time allows. We have 2.3 million Americans behind bars. So we live, in essence, in a prison state. That number should shake all of us, particularly those of us in the judiciary. And a disproportionate number of those people are people of color. And so I've been involved in my community in trying to address this both from an upstream and downstream perspective. Children in my school, in Ames, black children read at 33 points behind their white counterparts at 4th grade. So I have worked very hard to marshal additional resources to help closing the literacy gap, to reduce the number of people going into our prison or jail system, but also for people coming out. I go to visit people in our jails, and they come out without hope, and we have to do more to marshal resources to give people a sense of direction and a path when they come out of jail or prison. But I do think that Chief Justice Cady has done a marvelous job of helping us to think about how implicit bias affects us all. So I appreciate your comment very much, and I would definitely be a part of trying to work towards remedying that in Iowa.
Mr. Sukup.
Good afternoon. You've done extensive speaking at seminars. What's sort of your favorite topic, or the one you believe you can make the most difference in?
Yeah, thanks for asking that question, Mr. Sukup. So my presentations generally fall into one of two categories: real estate and ethics. And the ethics has come a little bit later. And frankly, I really believe in the importance of ethics education. And I have not been happy with the quality of ethics presentations I have been a part of. And so I decided to get in and try to do a better job of improving that. So one of the characteristics of a presentation that I give, whether it's in real estate or ethics, is you walk out with a lot of practical examples. My outline is a substantive outline. In fact, I provided you one of those outlines as a writing sample because I want to give resources to our Iowa lawyers. And on this subject, I have a deep love of lawyers. Lawyers are involved in their communities, getting things done, making a difference in our community. And if I can do something small to put tools in the hands of our lawyers, I want to do that. Thanks for asking that.
Mr. Goodman.
Mr. Gartin, I want to make sure I understand your practice. You've talked quite a bit about property law. You're also substantially involved in contractual law, is that correct?
Correct.
And
So,
go ahead, after you.
no, so business law, I set up a lot of business entities. I do a lot of wills, probate work. So if there's a contract involved, I like getting involved with it. I probably like the best drafting contracts that are unique, something that I don't have in my formal library, that I have to actually do some lawyering on and actually think about what are the best interests of my client and protecting those interests.
And if I were to search the hallways of this building among the 17 justices and judges for a property lawyer or a transactional lawyer, who would be the closest thing to Tim Gartin in this building in terms of experience?
I don't know that you have someone here. That's why I'm here.
Do you think in the 1800s or way back in history when property rights were perhaps more important or different, that area of law was more important than it is now in this world of torts and criminal law and all the other things that we spend more of our time fighting about?
Well, it's a very complicated question. So, in the 1900s, we had far more of a common law type of legal system than we do today. And through this process of codification, we've gone through a process of moving case-made law, judge-made law, to statutes and administrative law. And I think that's had a big influence in the shift of dynamic. In fact, that's one of the things that's motivated me. In the spring, I'll be doing a presentation at Drake on statutory interpretation. Law school teaches us how to read cases and develop an understanding of the case law. It does precious little for helping us to think about statutory interpretation. And so I think that there has been a shift, Mr. Goodman, in that area.
Thank you.
Ms. Law.
We've heard a lot of comments over the last few months about that businesses, we need to have good courts because it attracts businesses to Iowa, and businesses want to know we have a good court system for bringing business to the state and moving to the state. How do you think your transactional background might help in that regard?
Thank you for asking that question, Ms. Law. It's because what we want is certainty. Now, when I say there is importance to this, I want to be very clear in how I articulate this. This is not about ruling in a way that favors a business outcome. That's not what I'm suggesting at all. In fact, the question is, you're applying the rule of law. I believe if we had more time, I'd like to talk about my view of textualism and separation of powers. I want the legislature to make these decisions. I'm going to take more of a deferential posture. So I believe we should apply the law as it is. What the business community wants is certainty. They don't want to be playing whack-a-mole and wondering what the rule in Iowa is going to be this year. Who's going to be on the court now? So people are making decisions based upon their understanding of the law, and that's what I want to try to bring to the table.
Mr. Gray?
Better ask a quick question.
Yes.
You've got an abstract title in front of you. You
Yes.
brought it today. About half the people here probably don't know what is involved in reading an abstract title. Tell us what you do and why it's important.
So I am searching for the root of title, and I'm making a determination. I'm looking for at least a 40-year chain of title, but I'm making a determination of what property interests are involved here. And this, Mr. Gray, this is a great question. It draws on so many areas of law. You have to understand family law, at least how it impacts real estate transactions, estate planning, of course, real estate law. And so there are a number of different areas that are impacted that you have to have when you examine these abstracts. Thanks for asking that question.
You're welcome. I used to do that, and they won't let me do it anymore.
Well, Mr. Gartin, we are nearing the end of our time today, but we appreciate you being here, and we wish you the very best.
Good luck. Good luck in putting together this team. Thank you very much.
Thank you.